There's been so much, like for every team that wins, obviously another loses, and sometimes it's more cruel than feels like it needs to be. A good place to start for traumatic moments in Gaelic football, I think, has to be Dublin. Now, they've been dishing them out to the likes of Mayo for the last number of years, but as I was looking through this and talking to other people about traumatic moments, I actually realised that Dublin suffered any amount of trauma over the years. Whether, like, we'll go into them in detail in a second, but like, think Ray Cosgrove, think Maurice Fitzgerald, think David Beggy, Mikey Sheehy back in 1978, Kieran MacDonald. They've had some amount of it. So maybe, in a way, they're thinking, we've had so much put on our bill of misery over the years, it's about time we started dishing it out.
Yeah, they're finally redressing a balance that was probably very uneven for God only knows how many years, when they were coming up short and there was all sorts of different little things like, yeah, like remember the Cosgrave point, remember the curl on it, it's coming in and it just didn't get there, and Armagh go on and win the All-Ireland. And that's one of many, it's one of many. And even, I was just thinking as you were talking there, like even when their unbeaten streak ended, it's funny, like I don't know if you describe it as trauma, but like Dean Rock's free at the end, they still even had a chance to keep it going and grab an equaliser. Like, so that's even when they're going well, there's still a little bit of trauma in there. But I was just thinking, even I was chatting you off air there, like Neil Cotter's book Dublin, the Chaos Years. There's something. It's a brilliant book, and there's something about like misery and pain and defeat that it just evokes nearly as much, if not more, emotion than victory. And going back through all those traumatic moments that you mentioned, it's unreal. They're unprecedented success now, but just some hardship before then.
Yeah, sort of misery porn. Sure, there was that book from Henry Martin, Unlimited Heartbreak, on those years that Limerick suffered. Like Mayo have obviously had oodles of it. Waterford hurlers, Galway did for years, or certainly 29 years of it. But yeah, let's start off with Ray Cosgrave, 2002. I mean, the fact that they proved throughout the game that they're every bit as good as Armagh, who went on to win an All-Ireland. I mean, the frustration of that. And like you said, in front of the hill, a free that, for a right footer, it should come back and go on target the way the ball would curl. That's got to be frustrating. Croke Park being obviously a scene of plenty of these miseries. The Mikey Sheehy lob. Now, he lobbed Paddy Cullen, who of course came out. Free was called. Sheehy lobbed it over. I think anyone who's a GAA fan, and certainly a big fan of Kerry, will remember that. Dublin fans will remember for the wrong reason. But Con Houlihan memorably described it as Paddy dashed back to his goal like a woman who smells a cake burning. Like, it's such a vivid sort of an image. But like, what about Kieran MacDonald's point in 2006? Such a brilliant flowing move. There was actually 3 or 4 minutes left even at that point. But it almost feels like that was the punctuation point and the absolute end of the game. And I remember watching that game when Dublin went about 5 or 6 points ahead early on in the second half. I said, this game is done. And at the time, I still had an interest in Blackburn Rovers. I mean, there's only so long I can keep that sort of heartbreak going and watch them getting relegated or whatever. But they were playing Chelsea the same day. And I said, you know what, I'll flick over to the Chelsea-Blackburn game. Blackburn getting pasted 2-0 at home, absolutely useless. And I flick back over to the Mayo Dublin game just as it's over. And I see I'm after missing one of the greatest classics. Like, it had been an alright game, Dublin coast, and I said, we're done here. But yeah, back to Dublin. They did love a bit of heartbreak.
Yeah, they did. Jizz, you're after reminding me. That was obviously 06. You're talking about Colin Hendry, Chris Sutton, Alan Shearer. Jesus, good glory days. Glory, Tim Flowers. Glory days.
Well, those lads were long gone at that stage. You were like, you didn't even have a Billy McKinley or a Stuart Ripley left at that stage. Oh, Blackburn were gone to the dogs. You had Chris Sambo up front nearly at that stage. So things were looking poor enough. And I'd say some of the younger viewers would be even wondering who I'm talking about there. But even like, jump back to that unbelievable 4-game saga in 1991. Dublin ahead by 3 points going into extra time. Game just up. Kevin Foley goal, David Beggy point, the Micheál Murray commentary, unbelievable. The game just ends. So, and even the Maurice Fitzgerald sideline equaliser in 2001 in Thurles. I mean, there was a frantic last 12 minutes to that game. I think Kerry went from being 8 points up to a point behind. Just Dublin were on fire in that last 12 minutes or so. And then Maurice Fitz just cuts over an absolute beauty. Just time after time they get it. But what about some of the paybacks they've had? Would you count the double own goal as trauma for Mayo? I mean, it's not like they kind of collapsed on that. They still came back and showed the heart that this modern iteration of Mayo had.
I don't think trauma gets much worse than that. I remember being there, and the first one goes in, and you're just thinking, like, lads, this is a bit surreal, like, for this to actually be happening in an All Ireland final. And then a second one goes in. Like, there had been no own goal in an All Ireland football final until 2016, and then Mayo conceded two in one half. Like, I never forget people. That was the day people came out of Crow Park and they were like, I don't care what anyone says. It could be the biggest load of poppycock of all time, but the curse exists. There's just something not right here. There are things happening that should not be happening unless there's some supernatural force almost hanging over this Mayo team. And it was just phenomenal because they kicked Dublin up and down the field that day. They were by far the better team. Like they were the top scorers for Dublin with the two own goals basically that day. It was phenomenal stuff. And then obviously you had Cillian O'Connor's miss free to draw the game in I think the 76th minute then as well. That was in 17, was it? And it's just it's those are very very hard to take.
I,
Very
I
hard
think
to
that
take.
one was actually 16, that missed equaliser. That's trauma. I actually don't know if the goals do qualify as trauma, as in stuff we'll be talking about in 20 years' time. I think Donny Vaughan's red card, that might be personal trauma for him until his dying day, really, because, I'd say he'd love a do-over on that, just go back to that moment. But another big one, like you're talking about, it's almost eerie what happens with Mayo. Talk about 1996. There was an interview with John Madden, the goalkeeper, with Marty Morrissey on the field after the game, and he was trying to explain the situation whereby Colm Coyle, who was wing back for Meath that day in the All-Ireland final, how he could pick up a ball at midfield, kick it, it could bounce more or less inside the 14, I think, and hop over the bar when Mayo had the game all but won. I mean that's a horror show. Like Mayo had a 6 point lead after Ray Dempsey's goal in the second half, and then for it to come down to just like a freak incident like that where the ball bounces over the bar, I think if there's eerie stuff going on or a curse, it's more that day than any other day.
Yeah, funnily enough, actually, I was looking back at the 2013 All-Ireland semi-final there, and Philly McMahon actually got a point that hopped over the bar, nearly the exact same, because Donaghy was in full forward and Rory O'Carroll was holding them off, and Cluxton stayed back on the line, and it actually just, it bounced, or sorry, not Cluxton, whoever was in, Brendan Keeley that was in goals for Kerry. Dublin had someone in full forward and just hopped over him and over the bar. But that's mad stuff. You just don't envisage that sort of thing happening. That might happen in a junior B football match on a Sunday morning, like, or something, when there's sick heads everywhere. The goalie's not able to move, but it's not the sort of thing that would happen in an All Ireland final when a team is trying to get over the line. But like, I think the big elephant in the room, and it's going to be an elephant in the room until the end of time, is the 2010 Leinster final. Louth and Meath. It doesn't get any more traumatic than that. Louth had their hands. They had their hands on the Leinster trophy, and then like just a truly bizarre like sequence of events where I remember seeing a Rory Stories video where they did a recreation of it, and it was like Joe Sheridan like climbing over the line, rugby style almost, and that's like what it felt like. And you're looking at it and you're just thinking, there is no way this can stand. And everyone, it was 31 against 1. Everybody was rooting for the underdog. And then you see this kind of thing happening, and it's just unbelievably hard to believe what's going on. Obviously, Marty Sludden, the referee, kind of gets half nearly accosted after the match. And like, no one would ever condone that type of thing, but it's so easy just to totally lose the run of yourself when events like that happen, things that you just cannot foresee, that no one in their right mind could foresee happening. And it was probably it was traumatic, and it was probably one of the greatest injustices in the history of the GA as well.
Yeah, without doubt. I mean, no Meath person even took any joy from that day. That was the most compromised, asterisked Leinster title win you've ever seen. Like, he fully fell over the line with the ball in his hand. But like, Louth added to their own misfortune, because they had a chance to play keep ball at the other end of the field, and instead stupidly ran forward with it, lost the ball. Like, they had that game won. And will Louth ever win a Leinster title again? I mean, in our lifetimes, will they? I don't know. It looks highly, highly unlikely. But what's more of an injustice, that score or Seamus Darby with a clear push in the back for the
Ah,
1982?
here. Stop now! I'm gonna cut you off. I'm gonna cut you off. It was traumatic for all Kerry people involved, including the boys that had done the five in a row song and the boys that had made the t-shirts and had the homecoming planned and everything. But there was no push. It was a beautifully timed catch, using ever so slightly using his body weight to. To move Tommy Doyle ever so slightly across, but I can't imagine how Kerry felt after that. You know, history is in your hands. I know a lot of people left the match early and they just thought it was over and everything. And that must have that like you talk about trauma. Like I've my uncle-in-law is from Kerry, and all I ever like we're still talking about that when Kerry beat Offaly in the hurling last year to relegate us to the Christie Ring Cup was like finally revenge for 82, 37 years later. Like that's the way to think. If you say to any Kerry person, oh, where are you from? Oh, I'm from Offaly. Oh, that fucker Derby. That's all you will get. It's like that will stand around with them till the end of time. And I'd say Dublin winning five in a row was even more of a sickener than last year as well.
A couple more to come to mind. Mayo Galway 2002 Connacht semi-final. Conor Mortimer missed a free that he probably would have knocked over in his sleep otherwise. Kildare, when they were looking to get to the All-Ireland final in 2010, they were 2 points behind down, and then Robert Kelly had that free from the 21, blasted. I think it was Callum King who probably touched it onto the crossbar. I mean, you can imagine the misery for Kildare fans who've had plenty of it down through the years in All-Ireland finals and at Croke Park. Desi Dolan, 2003 Leinster quarter-final. Westmeath had never beaten Meath in the championship, and just a free that he should be knocking over. And he was quoted afterwards as saying, it wasn't easy to deal with, it was tough, it meant an awful lot to an awful lot of people to beat Meath, and I'd had the ideal opportunity to do so. So so I was receiving things like hate mail, and I was only 22 or 23, so that's rough.
That was rough. Yeah, I remember watching that at the time, and you were just thinking, this is the best chance that they will ever have. And it was so routine for him, and he just kind of skewed it. I remember it went. I can't remember left or right post, but I remember like Westmeath got absolutely hockeyed in the replay. I think they only kicked 5 points, and kind of normal order resumed. Thankfully for Desi, anyway, that ghost was put to rest when the boys had an unbelievable comeback a couple of years ago and beat Meath. I think it was for the first time in the Leinster Championship or first championship victory over them. So at least he could let that go after that many years. Just on frees that have been missed and traumatic frees. Like Portlaoise have had so many near misses in the Leinster Club Championship, and Paul Catalan had a great chance free in front of the goals to level against Ballyboden a couple of years ago. He misses. Ballyboden win by a point and go on to win the Club All Ireland. It's those ones are very, very hard to take. There's been, when you go down through it, there's been an awful lot of trauma for an awful lot of different counties, and even we got some good suggestions in through Twitter as well. We put out to everyone on Twitter. Paddy McGill, who everyone will know, the commentator up in Donegal. He's a picture of Joe Brawley with the colourful Sandico gloves on, kissing to the crowd. He said Joe Brawley's goal in the dying seconds of '98 Ulster final. I was 12. It wasn't right for a few months after. His celebration didn't help either. And Shane Ward, then not Shane Ward of X Factor fame, but another Shane Ward, said, and what about Jeffrey's pushing the lead up to the goal? The great Jeffrey McGonigal, one of those iconic figures. That's another one of those hard ones to take. Kevin Nugent from Forban has Forban v Clara senior football semi-final 2017. Forban were up by I think 5 points going into injury time. Clara got 2 goals and beat them kind of with an inexperienced Clara team. And then, in fairness, Forban did something very, very similar to them this year, or last year I should say, in the club championship, and ended up going on winning the county title. So at least they got their own back. Couple of other football ones. David Kelly, my independent colleague, said that I mentioned the 06 game against Mayo on my piece today on Kieran MacDonald. Please don't refer to it again. That was obviously fairly traumatic for him. And there's a couple of other good ones as well. Other football ones. A lot from a Kildare point of view. Robert Cribben says both 2010 and 2011 against Down and Donegal, 2 agonising defeats, but especially 2011 for me, as Kildare had Donegal on the rack in extra time, but just couldn't finish the job. the two counties were in different directions afterwards. Donegal went on and won All Ireland the year after, and Kildare went the other way. Remember that game? Dermot Earley was missing for that game. I think he did his cruciate in the match before that. But that was fairly traumatic
And
for them.
another one
All right.
that comes to mind actually, just when I'm thinking there, is Fermanagh have never won an Ulster title, drawing 8 points apiece with Armagh, I think in 2008. I might just check that when you're reading over the next comment. But for them, that must be unbelievably agonising.
Ah, yeah, definitely, definitely. And Billy Quinlan has another one here. The 2006, 2006 semi-final again, another Dublin man. Happily celebrating my birthday. Dublin comfortably handled Mayo up to about 50 minutes. This is the same as what you said, actually. Enter Andy Moran with a well-taken goal. Game on. Dubs showboating. Mayo reel it back in. Kieran Mack with a point for the ages. Definitely, you couldn't quickly forget that one anyway. Any other? No, I'd say that's the majority of the football ones. Just on a personal level, myself, do you know the way you're often asked, like, what's the worst defeat you ever had or something like that? I'd always go back in football terms. We'd no under-21 team in Burr, so we played with Ferban. They were the nearest club to us, and we played an under-21 final and against St. Michael's, who were road. They were going for 6 in a row. We were up by a point in injury time. The referee was after having an absolute nightmare. We should have been out of sight. We're up by a point in injury time. Niall Darby came up from centre back and kicked 2 points to beat us by a point. It was absolutely sick. I never forget Garrett Hickey, who plays with Lomans and Mullingar, won a few county titles with them. I'll just never forget him coming up to me after and actually saying he just said sorry to me, because it was that kind of nearly much of a robbery at the end of a game.
I actually had that scoreline wrong in 2008 between Fermanagh and Armagh. It was actually 1-11 to 2-8 the first day, and I'm sure they're still kicking themselves over that. And Armagh went to replay 1-11 to 8 points, and that often happens that the favourite gets it done the second time out. We started off with Dublin misery, and we might as well finish off with another bit of Dublin misery, because I'd forgotten to mention this the first time around. The 1994 All-Ireland final that they lost to Down, 112 to 13 points. Charlie Redmond with a golden opportunity to give Dublin a right foothold in the second half. So penalties won by Desi Farrell. He steps up, takes it, hits it at more or less straight at the keeper. Rebound comes back his way. Now there's a defender coming in to meet him at the same time as he's about to strike the ball agonisingly wide with nobody there to block it in terms of a goalkeeper. So poor old Dublin. I mean, we don't say that often, but back in the good old days, in the rare old times, it was poor old Dublin.
It's almost like, you kind of everyone will probably take a bit of solace in this, like, especially in hard times at the moment, that like maybe the tide will turn and they'll go back to the, as you said, the rare old times where they had all these misfortunes again. But for the moment, it's kind of hard to see. But when you look back at some unbelievably traumatic moments for different counties, for me, the most traumatic of them all would have to be Louth, though, because I don't think, as you say, I don't think they'll ever get an opportunity like that. Like 10 years gone, and they're as far removed from a Leinster final now as they're ever going to be.